So when people who might look at this at our deeper dive site won't get the Marianne Anderson part. Only you're getting that. Do we have that?
Yes.
Thank you. And I will. There we go. So I'm calling this session 2-3 because that's kind of what it is for me. We had a session 1, and if you were at that, you participated in small group discussion of the book, just as we were supposed to. But I wasn't there because power outage prevented that. So I like to start with kind of a little thought, I guess. And I have these 2 thoughts. One is from the Kabbalah, which is a Jewish text. It's the Hebrew book of mysticism, as you may know. And the other is by Rumi, who is a worshiper of Islam, was a poet of the 13th century. He wrote only spiritual poetry. But so in the Kabbalah, it says, when you are able to be grateful for the presence of the other, you ignite the holy sparks in them. And we're going to do the gratitude meditation a little later on, and I wanted to sort of introduce the idea of gratitude here. When you're able to be grateful for the presence of the other, you ignite the holy sparks in them. Can you imagine how that maybe works in the classroom? If you are grateful that that child is there, as opposed to frustratingly dejected to have that child there, what a difference that makes. And Rumi said, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. And in mindfulness, one of the things we understand is that, as I said last time, we're not called to solve all the problems of the world. We're called to open our hearts. And the farther we open our hearts, the more possibilities and solutions will come to us. And so this is a very quick glance at the agenda, which I kind of already said aloud: racial healing, the gratitude meditation, and of course our book study, which I'm so appreciative that you're joining with me. So trauma-informed teaching is an act of love. And you could actually talk a lot about trauma-informed teaching in you're going to get these slides, by the way. I'm sorry you didn't get last week's slides yet. It's because I haven't negotiated with the NWP how to get them to you yet, but I bet we'll be able to do that in the next week. And I'll give you last week's slides and these slides also. So you're going to get this whole PowerPoint to use however you want afterwards. But trauma-informed teaching is an act of love. And it involves what we might almost call common sense things, but common sense things that we don't maybe pay attention to always do in the classroom in our country because of the busyness of that work. We listen attentively and appreciatively. We hold positive regard. We receive and care for the concerns of the other. If they have a concern, we care about it. And Susan Craig, whose name I seem to forget each week so far, but Susan Craig, who wrote a whole book about trauma-informed teaching practice, that's one of my resources and sources, talks about needing a respect agreement. And I recommend using a respect agreement with your meetings with other colleagues and in professional development as modeling. And I recommend recommending it to classes. And if you teach a class, I recommend using it in a class. And I've used respect agreements K-12 and at the university. I don't think I've ever found resistance to them. One time a 7th grader said, after I'd worked out the respect agreement, she said, I asked them actually, do you have a suggestion for one more thing to add? And she raised her hand and she said, I think we should be allowed to keep our papers the way we want to, which was wonderful, wasn't it? And so I thought about that for a moment and I said, well, you know, that makes sense to me that you would want to keep your papers the way you want to. But if I'm going to be your teacher, what would be the point of me being your teacher if you always kept it just the way you want to instead of listening? So how about we say sometimes you'll make changes that I suggest and sometimes you keep it your way. She was okay with that. But listening to understand and appreciate, responding positively. This is what interests me about your idea. Receiving and caring. receiving and caring for the concerns of others, and always, always practice making the kind choice. If you go into the room with the intention of kindness, and if you can persuade students to enter the room with the intention of kindness, the universe shows us how to be kind. So we live in a world of trauma. Hunger is widespread. Racial trauma is at an urgent level, isn't it? People are dying. Domestic terrorism is at a historically dangerous point. We live in a pandemic. And oh, by the way, teachers are frontline workers responding to trauma and experiencing a large amount of secondary trauma. Andrew Harvey and Carolyn Baker say it's as if the entire planet is experiencing PTSD. There's a visual. So moving kind of quickly into the racial healing session, I think the lesson of this slide is just never underestimate a book. Never underestimate a book. Books are such powerful things, and we know that. And I would just say, with respect to racial healing, let's not forget it. There's this wonderful book, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks, which has the adult version, I guess you would say. But I'm showing you, as you can see, the Young Readers Edition, which is marvelous. It's probably a grade 7 to 12 book. If you don't teach grade 7 to 12, there are myriad children's books, picture books about Rosa Parks. My favorite of all is a book called Rosa, written by the wonderful African-American poet Nikki Giovanni, illustrated by the wonderful African-American illustrator Brian Collier. Both of these, there's sort of a movement right now to sort of say, let's tell the real story of Rosa Parks. She wasn't just a tired, unprepared person who happened to be sitting on a bus and felt rebellious that day. These books both teach us how she went through civil rights training with people like Ella Baker and Septima Clark at the Highlander School. She worked in the NAACP and so forth. So there's a movement to tell the real story of Rosa Parks. And I believe something like the real stories of important people can help us with racial healing. So let's make a step into racial trauma and healing for a moment. Racial trauma is ongoing, systemic, pervasive, and includes insulting and humiliating events. And I say that because racial trauma includes direct insult, direct harm, in ways that not all other violent trauma does also, but in ways that not all trauma does. And when trauma is inflicted through direct harm, it causes rage. Rage grows in the person who's received it. And we need to know that, because that's a little higher demand for our trauma healing. And we can heal racial trauma. And also there's quite a lot of study about, and I talked last time about how trauma is sometimes cultural and political and historical. I don't believe I got to this point. That's uncovered in the research of Dan Siegel, which is unresolved trauma is passed on. There's quite a lot of research about how unresolved trauma is passed on. Of course, it's passed on emotionally, because people tend to hurt other people if they've been hurt. But they have actually scientifically uncovered that it can be passed on in the sperm and in the eggs of the parents. And it becomes generational and additional generations of trauma. So healing racial trauma involves opening conversations on pain and pride. If we allow conversations on people's pain and on what they're proud of, especially as it relates to their race and culture, we go a long ways. It involves teaching Black accomplishment, which this country has largely not done. And it involves listening and responding with care to students. It involves creating opportunities for action. And this is where the rage comes in. Once a person has experienced direct harm and they have rage harbored within them, they need a safe and predictable and supportive environment, but they also need opportunities for action. And so if you have students who you know can use racial healing, or that you need to help the projects result in action, like public presentation or digital products, digital and page-based products that they can share and so forth, actions or even helping steps that they can take so that there's action. Um, I'm trying to think of the name of the guy that this book is from. I'll probably think of it later. But and one African American activist points out that if you can ask questions, let's suppose you're going to talk to your colleagues and involve and work on racial healing. If you can say not you did X, but instead how can we work on X together? Not you committed a microaggression, although if sometimes you need to say that, sometimes it needs to be said. But if you can instead introduce, how can we work on microaggressions together? See how much more possible that seems? And the thing I left out of the previous little remarks there is working to end white racism. There's a UCLA African-American psychologist who says, unless you are also, and her work is on racial trauma, and she says, unless you're also working to end white racism, you're just dealing with symptoms instead of causes. So this is a little cluster. And now I'm going to do, this is just 3 slides of Black accomplishment. And I'm speaking kind of quickly right now, but I might even speak more quickly as I give you these 3 slides. So it isn't a very long tour, but I hope what I am doing successfully is suggesting the power of the true stories of accomplishment. So Duke Ellington, I would submit, is rarely thought of in any kind of American studies whatsoever. And if he's thought of, it's as an old-time band leader. He led a band back there in the olden days. But actually, if you study Duke Ellington, you realize he was known as the king of jazz. You realize that he premiered his new long composition in Carnegie Hall each year from 1943 to 55. You realize he wrote movie soundtracks. I've spoken to sophisticated piano players, sophisticated pianists who say playing Duke Ellington is not like playing any other composer. So he was a unique composer. And George Gershwin, who was the most famous white composer of that era, said, I would trade everything I've ever composed if I could just have written Sophisticated Lady, which was a Duke Ellington song. So George Gershwin sort of declared Duke Ellington to be America's greatest composer. Mary McLeod Bethune was born one of 17 children to formerly enslaved parents in 1875. She wangled not only a grade school education, but a high school and a college education, at which point she found that the Presbyterian Church would not accept Black missionaries, which was the most biggest disappointment of her life. So she did one of the only things an educated Black woman could do at that time, and she opened a school. So she opened a school that had 5 Black girls sitting on overturned boxes in a rented house in 1904. By 1923, she had a faculty of 25, a student body of 250, and she was invited to rescue Cookman Institute, a failing nearby educational institution. And she became the first president of Bethune-Cookman College, which is a school that exists to this very day. And she went on to be an advisor to Eleanor Roosevelt and to serve on FDR's Black cabinet. Percy Julian, who I would guess nobody has heard about today, was a faculty member at DePauw, realized he was never going to get promoted or included. So he left and worked for Glidden Laboratories in Chicago as a PhD researcher, where he invented a whole series of lab-produced drug products that cured illnesses. I would say the most significant of which was he invented synthetic cortisone. They began to realize that cortisone was a very potent and helpful drug, for all kinds of ailments. You could rub it on you and have it injected into you. It was a miracle drug, really, of the 20th and 21st centuries. And when they discovered the power of cortisone, the source for it was animal bile, which is like no source. First of all, if you tried to get that abundantly, you'd be being inhumane to animals. And second of all, you can't mass produce that. So he invented synthetic cortisone and made cortisone a possible medicine, Percy Julian. So if you wanted to have a couple of books for yourself and others, if you were going to guide a faculty group, for example, I would recommend these two books. Goldie Muhammad's Cultivating Genius, of course, where there's the, she's big right now, and I'm so glad she is. And she talks about an equity framework for cultivating genius, particularly in children of color, but really in all children. And Larry Ward talks about America's racial karma. Larry Ward is an African-American PhD Buddhist leader, sort of anointed by Thich Nhat Hanh, actually, to carry on Buddhist work. And he wrote a book called America's Racial Karma. And this book is, there's a sort of misunderstanding about karma oftentimes, about how you better not do that because karma will come back and you know, hit you on the head. But really, the karma is simply that when you do a wrong or a negative, you create an environment and a momentum and a set of negative possibilities. And here's one of Larry Ward's. I want you to get this book. So here's one of the things he says. I'm practicing right now with some mantras. The first one is stand up in the house of belonging. Don't act like this is not your land. Don't act like you can't take charge, because it's obvious to me that the principalities and powers who are supposed to be in charge of this land at this moment are absolutely incapable. So stand up, act like you're a real human being. Don't let the messengers of systemic racism define your life for you. So that's Larry Ward. So thank you for your kind of patience with my hurrying. And now we're getting to our meditation, and we do have time for our meditation because I hurried. But I want to pause over just the idea of meditation for a moment. And we have some people who had mindfulness training in our group, but we also probably have a lot of people who aren't that familiar with sort of mindfulness practices, one of the most prominent of which is meditation. Now, meditation can be as simple as point 2 here, closing your eyes restfully for a few minutes. I know, I don't know this person. I was going to say I know her, but I know her because she has a YouTube online. And what she does is at the end of every day for her elementary students, she puts Yo-Yo Ma's The Swan on and has them close their eyes for 5 minutes. The Swan is about a 3.5 minute song. And that's her meditation. So it can be that simple. And because we study things scientifically here in the West, we've been studying meditation, and we already know that it improves students' psychological health. It helps them be calm. We know it increases their learning performance. And it does that even if we do it quite clumsily. And meditation has a long and powerful and important history. In Buddhism, it's engaged in to become fully awake. In Hinduism, it's how you wake up your soul. But there's a long tradition of things like meditation in Christianity. Sometimes it's called sitting in silence or holy listening, or actually the Dominicans call it the prayer of inner quiet. And the Dominicans, what they're talking about is you assume an attitude of prayer and then you ask for nothing. You're just listening. So I'd like us to do the gratitude meditation. I'm going to guide us through it step by step, no worry. I hope you are able to enjoy it and appreciate it. The meditations that I do with you here are available on my website. I have a video of me doing the meditation on my website. So you could do it again there, or you could even use that until you're ready to lead it yourself. So the gratitude meditation is a traditional and important meditation. Friends of the gratitude meditation are considered to be generosity and forgiveness. When you do the gratitude meditation, it helps you offer generosity and forgiveness. But also, when people are generous and forgiving to you, it calls out your gratitude. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about its power in a moment. But here, or actually, I'm going to continue on that point for a moment. When you put gratitude in the foreground, you put your anger and resentment in the background. See how that can be? I'm going to focus on gratitude and the things I'm grateful for. And your anger and resentment sort of swings to the background. And Nelson Mandela said, that when you carry your anger and resentment around with you, it's like putting toxins into your body and hoping that they kill your enemy. That was the way he put it. And Meister Eckhart, who was a 13th century German mystic, said this: if the only prayer you ever said was thank you, that would be sufficient. And if you do a gratitude meditation and all you're really doing is saying thank you, that's sufficient. It doesn't have to be a sophisticated gratitude meditation. Thich Nhat Hanh, who I often refer to, I'm sure he did hundreds of gratitude meditations with people. And sometimes before he started, he would just playfully say this. He would kind of jokingly say this. He would say, we could call this the no toothache meditation. Because you could start out by being grateful that you don't have a toothache, or you don't have a migraine, or you don't have a broken leg, he would say. And then he would say, and if you happen to have a toothache or a migraine or a broken leg, you can be grateful that you don't have all three. So that was his way of relaxing people. One of the powers of the gratitude meditation is it opens the pathway to abundance. By being grateful, you sort of prepare to be grateful, and that invites abundance. So let us begin the meditation. Would you put your body in a comfortable position? Allow your body to relax. Allow your eyes to close if you're willing, and that's okay for you. I'm going to ring the bell twice to start the meditation. In a meditation, we are kind of being attentive and watchful, but we aren't chasing after anything. We're a little bit, we're being curious maybe and watchful, but we're not chasing anything. It's okay. We don't have to run after it. So let's start always by connecting to our breathing. We're going to take 3 deep breaths together. Breathe in deeply. Lingering out breath. And breathe in deeply. Lingering out breath. Let it all out. And a third one, breathe in deeply. Lingering out breath, let it all out. I'd like you to further relax a little bit. See if you can relax the muscles around your eyes. See if you can unclench your jaw. See if you can do a quick body scan for chronic or current tightnesses and maybe send a little relaxing signal. And now I'd like you to go back to noticing your breathing. You don't have to change your breathing. You don't have to breathe deeply. Just notice that your breath is coming inside your nostrils and you can feel it there. And notice that it's raising your chest and filling your chest around your heart. And also notice your heartbeat. You're breathing through your nostrils and into your chest. And then some level you can notice your heartbeat. And this is going to be our first stop in our gratitude. Our heartbeat and our breath is something we share with all living creatures on the planet. All living creatures on the planet have breath. All living animals on the planet have breath and a heartbeat. And this connects us to them. And would you just choose to be grateful for a moment for your breath and your heartbeat and the opportunity of this life? And reflect on that for a moment. And now would you send that gratitude out to the universe as appreciation? And next, let's focus on the earth. It's always appropriate and never excessive to be grateful to the earth. And I'd like you to see the earth provides everything: the air, the ground beneath our feet, the spirit and presence of the creatures and the plants and the minerals. Mother Earth is our direct link to the mother of everything. And I'd like you to think of something that Mother Earth provides, something specific if you can. It could be as simple as air or a flower or some animal or some other factor. And choose to focus on something that the earth provides. And let's spend a moment in the joy of reflecting on that. And now let's send that joy and gratitude for that joy out into the universe as appreciation. And third, I would like you to think about yourself and something or someone that you are grateful for. What is someone or something that you are grateful for? And when you start to let that someone or something that you are grateful for emerge, see if you can't visualize what you are grateful for from that person or from that something. What are you grateful for from them? And spend a moment focusing on the joy of that gratitude of what that someone or something provides you. And now send that gratitude out into the universe as appreciation. And for our last stop on this short gratitude meditation, I'd like to see if we can't project our gratitude into the future just a little bit. I'd like you to try to think of something that you could do for yourself in the next day or two. Something probably small, like go to bed early and read that book on your nightstand, or spend a little extra time with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and savor it and be glad for it. Maybe phone a friend that you have wanted to talk to. Maybe take a walk, only this time take a walk where you try to be curious about what's beautiful out there. And when you do this step, be grateful for it. And so I'd like you to take a moment to joyfully plan to do this thing for yourself. And I'd like you to remind yourself that when you do it, you're going to be grateful and set to send that gratitude out to the universe as appreciation. And as we move toward closing our meditation, I want to make this point, which is often made by the wise teachers of gratitude meditation. Gratitude meditation is one of the meditations that connects us to our true self, our essential self. And that's one of the reasons maybe why it feels somewhat powerful. Our true self, our essential self, is always grateful. Our true self knows the great gift of the opportunity of this life. And so our true self is always grateful. So we connect to that when we are grateful for other things as well. So I'd like us to take 3 deep breaths on our way out of this meditation. First deep breath, deep in breath, lingering out breath. Second deep in breath, lingering out breath. And now our deepest breath so far, deep in breath. And a lingering out breath, let it all out. And now, in your own time, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And so with the 2 bells at the start, I'm calling you to the meditation. And with the 1 bell at the end, I'm sending you back home. The steps of this meditation are here, but this very meditation is at the website. So as I look at chapters 10 through 12, I didn't ask you to read the commitment to meditation part, which just comes before it. I hope you will. I hope if you take a moment, you can notice the diverse mentor text examples that I'm using. On 140 and 142, I'm not going to the book because I don't want to take the time to do that. But on 140 and 142, I have a little set of mentor texts. One is Naomi Shihab Nye, who's a Palestinian American. One is Christopher Paul Curtis, who's an African American. And one is Louise Erdrich, who's a Native American. And one is Patricia McKissack, who's also an African American. So in that particular set, I don't have any white people. But in each chapter, I would say there's probably a majority white people, but there are always, every set of mentor texts at the end of every chapter, or included in every chapter, is diverse. And I'd just like to point out that I'm giving you a hard lecture about how correctness comes at the end. And are there 1 or 2 people who could read a quote for us? A quote from chapters 10 through 12. It's probably one of the quotes you were planning to share in your small group, but you would share it now with us in the whole group. And you, by the way, you did a marvelous job last time, and I'm depending on you again to jump right in. So many, it's hard to do on Zoom, but you guys were great. And so please be great again. Somebody read a quote.
I'll share. This one comes from page 180. And the quote is, "We should forbid ourselves from commenting on errors at any stage of writing before the 5th and final stage, editing."
Thank you, Karen. You saw that by my little quick remarks that I agree with you. Would you say a sentence or 2 about that?
Yeah, I just want to say that, that quote, at least for me, is preaching to the choir,
Right.
because I think that, focusing on errors early in the writing process just inhibits kids from wanting to write. It just makes them reluctant because they think they can't be successful. And sometimes it's challenging sort of training students to not focus on the common errors until the end, because that's what they're used to experiencing. We want to focus on thinking and the idea development and all of those good pieces before errors.
Thank you. Beautifully said. I appreciate that very much. And you're preaching back to the part of the choir too here. How about one more?
Sure, I have one, Richard. It's on page 149. This is in your reflection on Jamal. And it says, "We are teacher coaches first, and the first rule of love is do no harm."
Thank you. Would you say a couple sentences about that, Kelly?
Yeah, I related to this whole story about Jamal, having been in classrooms before where with students who don't outwardly rebel, but rebel maybe in small little ways in trying to maintain some sort of power in the classroom for whatever reason. And I loved the way that you described your interaction with him and how you said at the top, like, each time I sought to win, quote unquote, in our battle, he countered me. And so there was just this lovely exchange that went back and forth. It reminded me very much of my son, because this is something that I could see him very much do as I was reading. So I'm like, oh, this is Jackson. So I just thought it was beautiful how you engaged with him and how he participated in it, and you sort of allowed him to do it in a way that was kind of authentic to him without, but still managed to get him to, in some ways, do what you were asking him to do.
Thank you so much. Again, beautifully said. Laura's going to send us off to small groups in just one moment. I just want us to look at this reading discussion group thing. The people who write about trauma-informed practice, and I'm trying to adapt that to our book here that we're studying, talk a lot about predictability and safety. And in our groups, for example, when someone shares a quote, if you predictably and safely respond, what I find interesting about your quote is that's a very supportive response. And I hope that's what you will do. And Laura's going to send us off, and we'll probably be in these groups for about 15 minutes, which will put us right up against 4 o'clock, and then we'll just come back together for 5 minutes. Thank you very much for your patience with my presenting. Yes.
Hey, Richard.
Oh,
Hey,
nice.
Richard.
Hey there, Jill and Kelly. Were you and I in the same small group last time, Jill?
I think we were.
Yeah, that's still we're
Yeah.
done. And we're also thinking partners. And
I know. I think this is a universe is acting on us. I think
exactly, totally.
It's a conspiracy.
it is. But what a great conspiracy!
It's
Right.
so lovely.
Yes.
Always with friends. And so thank you for sharing your quote, Kelly. And you'll get and we'll come back to you too to share another. But let's go to Jill or me just so that Kelly gets to hear a quote also.
Well, I have a quote from page 170
Mhm,
that is in the correctness chapter,
mhm.
and you're preaching to another member of the choir here,
Right,
just
course.
so you know. But despite the fact that few, if any, adults produce perfectly correct copy, even most of the time, for some reason, we feel that fifth graders, for example, ought to be correct absolutely all of the time.
Uh-huh.
And, I don't teach fifth graders, but I teach college freshmen. And I have this visual of them coming into the classroom, carrying many, many comments and teachers on their backs. And most of it deals with this correctness issue. And so, I spend a lot of time trying to undo that concept. And I just don't know why. Well, I think I know why. I think sometimes it's easier to correct those types of things. It's easy to pick a comma splice or a fragment or say, there's no capital letter here, than it is really to get in and encourage the writer to grow and develop.
Yep.
I think those types of comments are harder, at least without training, to make.
Yeah. It's easier to correct than coach, I think.
Yes. Thank you. You said it in 4 words and I said it in 75.
But it's also easier. It's easier to correct also, but you included more than that. And one of the things you included was preparation. If you're not prepared, it's easier to correct than coach. Yes. And so if we're going to be generous to the teachers, we need to try our mightiest to give them the preparation that will help them move to that, don't we? And do you want to say more? This was kind of, what would you like to say about this, Kelly? What are your thoughts or responses?
I 110% agree. And as a former English writing teacher, it's difficult. It is hard to do, to find, other than grammar, and then what it is. You're right. It is easier to correct than coach. And so, and even as someone who was an English writing major, it was often difficult to find a balance, because we were also in schools where, like when I was teaching writing at the time, we had to hang papers up with the rubrics. And we were told that we weren't supposed to hang papers in the hallway that weren't proficient papers.
Right.
So if a student was in a space, like they were an English language learner or they were a struggling writer, and for them, perhaps the best piece of work they could create might have been something that was basic on the rubric, they never had the opportunity to have their papers hanging in the hall because it wasn't, it had grammar mistakes. And so at some point you had to do that work, regardless of how beautiful that I felt the language was. There had to, at some point, be a focus on correctness, which students hated, but in order to be able to get it to the published phase. So it's,
I
don't know.
Yeah, my angle on that has been for a while Save it till the end, like we all have been saying,
Mhm.
but then just do it. You know, they correct as much as they can. Maybe they get helped by a peer editor if we have peer editors prepared, and there are ways to manage that. And then, to me, the adults can correct the rest of it. And what we often did when I was working with kids is we would find a way to get that paper typed up. And of course, if they're of age, they can type it up. But we were sometimes we were like with a K3 group or something like that, and we would type and either when we typed it up or when they typed it up, we would do the correcting, and then it would just be correct. And I remember with Latino Writing Club, I promised them, I said, and of course, a lot of them still had Spanish as their lead language. I said, I promise you, I will help you make your paper correct at the end. You know, you don't have to worry about that. So I think you can correct without apology at a certain point. Yeah, and I don't know. Here again, I'm preaching to the choir. That's probably what you do.
I think that one of the problems that I see is this lack of preparation or lack of education in this type of pedagogy. And I see teachers spending hours and hours and hours grading papers when really, if you followed the workshop model that you developed, Richard, with the PQS, then there is that's all you need in the early drafts. And not that it's all, because that's a lot, but I don't know. I'm just befuddled. My own department is so narrow-minded in these things that it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, I think I feel like I've lived a while now, and I don't feel like I've ever lived in a time when there were many departments that were easy about this. but I feel like Larry Ward, who is asking us to be brave about racism, I feel like that's what we need to pep talk ourselves and try to be as brave about it as we can, because it's harmful to students. As you said, I forget which one of you said it now already, even though there are only three of us, but it makes, it was actually Karen who said it in our large group, that it makes the students discouraged. It makes them retreat. So here's one of the quotes I have. It's on page 147.
Sorry, it's my dog.
That's okay. It could just as well be Bojangles, as you know. No worry. On the mid 147, I say, a success is not better than a struggle during our have a go, try it session. To repeat for emphasis, struggle is desired and viewed as productive. Struggle is the step we often take to learn new things. Struggle is our friend, the friend of learning and progress.
I also have that one marked to share. Yeah.
Go ahead and be the first to talk about it if you like. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I just think that I want to share this with my students at the very beginning of the semester. I try to tell them about what it's really like to be a writer and a scholar, and that struggle is the part. We have to take risks. We have to make mistakes. It's only through the risks and the mistakes that we grow. And if we don't use the low stakes writing approach, for those teachers who aren't using it, then the students are deprived of this. And, when I think about it, could I sit down and just write something that I'm going to turn in for publication in one draft in a 20-minute period? Of course not. And I have to struggle with that. And so, the idea is getting that through to them, that it's okay to struggle. They come to college thinking that they know how to write and they know how to do all the things they're going to need to do to get through college. But what they're missing, they do have a lot of skills, but what they're missing is that struggle part, because they've always felt like they have to have the answer. And it has to be the right answer. It has to be a quick right answer.
Yep. I love that idea of sharing it early on with them, having a conversation about it maybe. And what are your thoughts about this, Kelly, if you have some? Struggle with.
I somehow missed this quote somehow when I was reading through it. So
That's the help of sharing.
yeah.
We reread the book together.
That's right. That's right. I think sometimes the mistake we make as teachers is that, at least speaking for myself, I think our students, I hear all the time where students just need to learn grit. I think our students have it. I think many of them
Yeah.
have struggled and have grit and have experienced that many of us don't experience. The problem is, I think sometimes they have difficulty with like translating that struggle from like, I struggle every day, or I'm struggling in this situation. And then it's like the academic struggle is just one more layer to the onion. And it's like, I don't know if I can apply that grit and that skill set that I have to overcome the struggle in this space to what I need to do it, over here. And I think too, I wonder sometimes, and I was having this conversation actually this morning with my thinking partner, if sometimes, particularly with our students of color, if the struggle just seems futile for them, like if, education hasn't served my family, it hasn't served us for generations. So that I'm not getting, it's sort of like if you go out every day and you exercise, but you're still not losing weight, how long are you going to keep doing it?
Mhm.
How long are you going to keep engaging in that struggle if you're not seeing anything out of it?
Yeah.
And so I wonder for our students and that's part of it. Like we have to help them. Anyone will. And I mean, Zaretta Hammond talks about this a lot in her interview with Jim Knight. She said that our kids have the ability to struggle, but she said they have to experience success. And no one's going to do anything and struggle through something if they don't experience success with it.
And I would say, excuse me, but I would say from a perspective of trauma and trauma-informed practice, nobody's going to struggle if they don't feel safe to struggle.
Yeah.
If they're going to be harshly judged or put down or set aside or knocked back, but if they know they're going to be received, with the P part of PQS, I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're struggling with this. I appreciate that you're trying X or Y. I think this part is working. And support, if they know support is there, then they get the courage to struggle, I think. Our time is, we have just a bit more time. And Kelly, I'd love to get one more quote from you, that if you have one for us.
Yeah. It was actually on page 139. A fifth grader in a school I was working with recently wrote, as the airplane lifted higher into the air, the lake became a pond, and then the pond became a puddle. He could have written about how the lake got smaller and smaller, but we wouldn't have visualized the sight quite so specifically, nor enjoyed the words quite so much as we do with his precise nouns. And I just thought that was a beautiful way of writing it. And I hadn't thought about how your choice of words could make that much of a difference. But I love that way that fifth grader described that, and the contrast between like how much more interesting it is the way that the fifth grader said it versus the lake just got smaller and smaller. It was just really, I loved it.
Yeah, thank you. Isn't that delightful what he came up with? And so often these kids do these brilliant little moves, and you just, makes you wonder, puts you in a wonder. Give us any quick thought you might have about that, Jill, that one that Kelly has shared.
I was just going to say that the next quote that I picked was right after that, when it is professional writers learn to choose their words carefully so that each word means as much as it can. And I love that idea too, that to share with students, this whole idea. I love the whole noun chapter. I'm going to say about the preciseness and what it really shows about the writer and their level of understanding of their subject, et cetera. But it just, when I thought about how the student did those three comparisons, just like a professional writer would do. And I think that's one of the moves that we can show them, one of the craft moves that's so important. I agree with you. This and the verbs are like top of what we can do.
Yeah. Thank you, you guys. Wonderful to be with you. I so enjoyed it. And speaking of safety, I feel so safe for the both of you. It's nice for me. Thanks.
It's nice for us too.
Yeah. Thank you. I got to be with Katy Perry again. Thanks, Richard.
Oh yeah. I love that actually. Even though it's absurd. See you back in
That's
the.
a great metaphor. We need to use it. We're gonna use it.
Hi, folks. I'd like to, maybe we could hear from two persons or two different groups, or two or three persons from the same group. But let's just hear, what was a quote that someone shared that was particularly meaningful to you? Or what did someone say in your group that helped you to understand? Or what is an insight maybe that you're having right now? Maybe you're having an insight. What does it feel like it is? Here again, be brave. Nobody outside of your group knows what happened in your group. So you're being generous with us if you just share.
I'll go.
Good.
One of the things that struck me was on page 181, the editing and the correcting of the papers. And I know that that's something that I need to work on with my class is, having the kids be more of a peer supporter. And the one sentence in there was, rather the moment should be the best, most healing and helpful learning experience that it can be. Just again, reemphasizing, establishing that culture of that support for each other, from each other. And I know that that's something that I need to work on in my classroom.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your honesty about that too, and I appreciate your calling attention to that. It's odd, isn't it, how high pressure correctness becomes? We could do it supportively and like a correctness coach. So thank you so much for reminding us of that. And one more, it could either be a quote or just something you're ready to say.
In my group, I think maybe it was Bill who brought up the point of struggle and the importance of productive struggle. And just what that, I'm thinking a lot about like what that should look like. And it was a really helpful piece to kind of get into this.
Thank you very much, Robin. Do you want to make that comment to us, Bill? We'd be glad to hear you say it.
I'm not sure what I said other than the quote that you have about struggle is such a critical point. I know John Dewey's point of nothing happens unless there's some degree of frustration that's involved. And
Right.
That's a really poor paraphrase.
Oh,
But I've actually had administrators tell me that you're frustrating the students too much. You can't, and that's true to some degree. You don't want to frustrate beyond the capacity to recover.
mhm.
But I think sometimes we're too quick to jump in there. We're too quick to go solve the problem. If we can give some gentle struggle, I think that's the key. I really do.
Thank you. And what you remind me, I'm glad you spoke up because first of all, I appreciate what you said and it's very clear, but also you remind me of the trauma piece. I think students struggle when they feel safe to struggle, when the response is not going to be a correction or a judgment or a setting aside or any kind of rejecting posture, but instead it's going to be PQS. This is what I appreciate about your struggle so far, and this is where I think you might be on the right track. Some kind of acceptance, and also maybe this little philosophy we're talking about how struggle is necessary and important. I actually think if you teach something to a group of kids and then they just do it, that's probably a sign they already knew it. It's because new learning involves struggle. And I guess I'd kind of market that. Where I have a little clock in front of me and it says 4:03, and I'm wanting to honor your time, and we're only going to go to 4:05. But I think I have a 1-minute thing. Does somebody else have a 1-minute thing? I'd so love to hear your quote or your statement.
I'll add one little piece, and I mentioned it in our group, and I can't remember who said it, about downdrafts and updrafts and the importance of draft writing. I make a huge point when I taught public school and now when I teach college that all of our writing for the first part of the year is just draft writing. There is no right or wrong. There is no correction. There is no grade. You get full grade for meeting the criteria of the assignment. But
Mhm.
I'm not going to assess and grade your draft writing because it's supposed to be crappy. And it takes a while, especially with first generation college students. And what I've found works is one sentence about you, your life, because you know your life. It cannot be right or wrong. We cannot argue about this because you're the expert on you. And it may take a while, but I will eventually get everybody to share their one sentence. And then it's up to me to model the praising, like you talk about, Richard, is so critical. Everybody wants an acknowledgement of their accomplishment. We have a yearning for accomplishment and we need to have that acknowledged. So I've never had a student refuse to share. It might take a second class, maybe a third class, but by then everybody, I've never had any student refuse to participate when we make it safe. And that's to me how we make it safe.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. So I'm sitting here realizing that I forgot to ask you to share your moment of beauty at the start of this. It's not shocking to me that I made an error. I'm going to try to share the screen again. There. Whoops. I got myself. Oh. Well, so I can't get to it. I'm going to have to figure this little Zoom part out. But if you wrote down something about your beauty, I don't want to make us stay after, so to speak, to share them. But but I promise, we'll share our 2 mindfulness steps at the start of our next session. We'll share our moments of beauty. I brought one myself. I wrote a little notebook entry about it. And the next mindfulness practice is the random act of kindness practice. And if I can give you this PowerPoint slides, you'll get that. But really, it's just do a small act of kindness for someone. Maybe it's someone you would expect to do a kindness step for and just do it and notice it. Or maybe it's happenstance. You just do an act of kindness for someone you come across. Or maybe you just notice when someone does a kindness for you. And what you do is you write, 3 or 4 sentences about this in your notebook so you don't forget what it was. And I want to suggest to you that this moment of beauty appreciation and this random act of kindness are not just activities. You can ignore them and not do them. And if you haven't done it, your grade is not marked down. But I recommend that you do them because they're mindfulness steps. When you look for beauty and you notice it, then more beautiful things come to you. And when you engage with kindness and you do it or notice the receiving of it, then the kindness grows in your world. It just does. It might feel mysterious, but those are mindfulness practices. So next time we're reading chapters 13, 14, and 15, the last chapters of the book. They were important to me in the writing, and I hope they feel important to you in the reading. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you'll come again next week. Thanks. And I'm going to have a very short presentation on LGBTQ. But anyway, we're going to read chapters 13, 14, and 15. I promise to pause at the beginning for beauty and kindness. And I'm leaving with gratefulness toward you for my opportunity to be in this community. So I have gratitude for that. Have a good week, my friends.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.